Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, once more. Oh, my hair's a little out of whack on that one. Didn't you see that one? Let me just, Alrighty. Gucci. We are back talking Marvel Crisis Protocol once more. Today we're chatting affiliations. What do you think about these affiliations? What's good, what's bad, what makes them good, what makes them bad on the flip side as well. So without any too much dawdling, we're going to jump straight into it. Alright, so this is all the different affiliations we have for Marvel Crisis Protocol. You can see my ranking of S down to C, and explain to you very quickly what these rankings are, and then put everything into a bit more context. So to me, S is obviously the affiliation itself is ludicrously powerful. It also depends on kind of the versatility that you have in each of the affiliations as well. What different characters do you have to take? Are you limited in certain ways, or can you really take whatever you want? Are these kind of abilities or affiliation abilities limited to certain characters in the game, and therefore you're a bit stifled in what you can choose in that affiliation? Because that's obviously a weakness when you do bring it into a meta or a tournament setting. If I see a majority of your characters, I can then plan kind of around that, or bring maybe weak links to what you're bringing as well. So that's kind of where you are in the S and the A tiers. Kind of, that's what drags you around that area. Maybe if your affiliation's a little bit worse, or you're too limited or restricted in what you can bring, or the characters that you can bring, that's where that B and C tier kind of come into play. Obviously, if your characters are very good, that's going to bring you up. If your affiliation's really good, that's going to bring you up again. Whereas if you're limited in kind of worse characters, maybe that brings it down a little bit as well. So look, that's kind of where you can see where this kind of comes through, and I'll explain a bit more as we go into it. But look, without getting too further into that one, we're going to jump straight into Red Skull here and the Cabal affiliation. I have all the affiliations on my left, so I can read them out relatively verbatim. And for Cabal, we have when each time an allied character damages an enemy character with an attack, after the attack is resolved, you gain a power. Now, why is this so strong? Why is this an S tier? And I'll kind of go over it. And a lot of these are going to cross over with the Avengers affiliation. So kind of listen closely for both of them. But what it is really simple. Power is your core resource in this game. There are very limited ways to get it, and it's very hard to break those rules to get it. These are ways to break the rules to get it. And that's what's so powerful about Cabal and Avengers. It is giving you power. The only times you get power, let's count it out. You get obviously the power phase, where you're getting like 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 if you happen to be Asgardian and on an objective, so 1 to 2 at absolute most. You're getting punched in the face. So, you're sacrificing your health for power anyway. Or some characters at the moment have like kind of actions that can give them power. But again, you're losing so much efficiency to spend actions to get that power. These affiliations, such as Avengers, such as Cabal, give you free power, which is massive. Now, looking at Cabal's kind of character lists, you're taking Red Skull, obviously. A lot of the time you're going to take MODOK. That already puts you at 9 power or 9 threat. Then you're probably going to take Zemo as kind of the lowest threat within that as well. So you're going up to about 12 threat to bring Cabal. So that's a bit of a weakness in itself. You don't have to take MODOK, but I feel like Red Skull and MODOK just work so well together. So that's definitely a limitation, and can almost see them in A by itself. But the fact that you're getting free power on multiple attacks a turn is crazy. When you hit 3 to 4 power in Cabal with a character, you generally sit at 3 to 4 power for almost the rest of the game. You think at MODOK, right? He's giving his whirling chairs of spitting death to your face. He gets a power for the first attack. Then if a second character is near them, he'll get a power for the second attack. He's throwing 16 dice for about 4 power. And ends up coming down to 2 power as well. Maybe you spend some rerolls anyway. It doesn't matter. But you know what I'm saying? A 4 power attack for 16 dice drops down to a 2 power because you finish that with 2 power. That's 2 power you can go to capture objectives. You can use to throw things. You can use to reroll your dice as MODOK. All of these incredibly powerful things. If you look at beam attacks, you're attacking multiple characters a turn. They each get you an energy, a power. Area of attacks, same thing. Every time you perform these attacks on multiple characters, you get multiple power back. That it means more power to control objectives, more power to throw characters, more power to spend on cards, more power to spend on re-rolls, whatever it may be. You just get a huge amount of power, and that's what Cabal is so amazing at. It takes you a little bit of time to kind of get to the 3 or 4 power, but once you get to 3 or 4 power, you just sit there for the rest of the game. Absolutely huge. Similarly, but conversely with Avengers, is from turn 1 to 2, you have access to a whole breadth of superpowers, because with Captain America, I'll open it up here, he says the first time that you use a superpower each turn, or each allied character uses a superpower each turn, it costs 1 power less. Now, this is a little bit restrictive in comparison to Cabal, because obviously you don't get it every time you use a superpower, so do keep that in mind, but you'll tend to often not use multiple superpowers in a turn, or if you're doing that, it's because you've got a huge power reserve and you're having a big turn anyway. But what this does mean is on your turns 1, on your turns 2, you can be doing a lot of things. You can be moving up the board, you can be throwing people, you can be capturing multiple objectives at once. You combine this with something like advanced R&D and Wong or Shuri, and suddenly for a very little amount of threat, you're just spreading all of this power around your crew very, very early. You're in the thick of it, you're ready to fight immediately. There's no like kind of building up turns or building up attacks. You're just in there and doing stuff, and that is, again, so powerful. You're breaking that rule of how often you can get power and the restrictions of getting power just by taking these affiliations, and that is what makes them so powerful. Now, kind of the big difference between Avengers and someone like Cabal is Avengers actually has a lot more versatility in their list. You're not restricted by taking this 5-threat character that is MODOK, though I'd almost recommend taking him in Avengers, to be quite frank, as MODOK. But you've got Captain America himself at 4. You've got a lot of the time you can take Winter Soldier to fill in that affiliation as well at 3-threat, and they work really, really well together. And then you can take any form of 2-threat character, like Black Widow or something like that, who's a really, really good objective taker in Avengers. Suddenly you've got your whole Avengers list ready at 9-threat. You know, if you're playing a 15-threat game, you've got 6 more threat that you can throw 2 characters into, maybe another 4 and a 2-threat, or a 3 and a 3. You can just see how much versatility is kind of in on these characters, and the more characters that come out offering superpowers that cost 2 or 3 power, Avengers are just going to get stronger and stronger as an affiliation as well. Because if you have advanced R&D and you spread around a bunch of power, on turn 1 and 2, you're using 3 power superpowers for like 1 almost, it feels like at that point, and you're just throwing things around. Your throws, your pushes, your movements, your charges, your Black Panther doing pounces and things like that. You know, you're just jumping and moving around the board so rapidly. All of your characters are online from turn 1, and that's what makes kind of Avengers such a powerful faction. Again, you know, it's cheating of getting power. It's just so huge now. Cool. Look, without harping on too long, because I can talk about that stuff for hours and hours and hours, but we'll jump on to kind of the A tier. Now, you'll notice that a lot of these characters actually spend power. Now, that's kind of almost a downside in a lot of ways, and will restrict a lot of these affiliations, because if you have huge power spenders, even if they're in that affiliation, they may not utilize that power very well, unfortunately. And that is just the gist of what spending power is going to be. Now, I'll also quickly comment that Marvel Crisis Protocol in general, and Atomic Games in general, you can kind of see they've associated 1 power with 1 dice. So 1 power will get you a re-roll, or add an extra dice, or subtract a dice. They normally associate 1 power with a dice. It's kind of what you see. So that's why you see a lot of these character affiliations costing 1 power and fiddling with a dice. Now, what Doctor Strange's ability is here, and why I think he's in the A team for a couple of reasons. It says once per turn when an allied character declares an attack, but before you choose the target, you can spend a power. If you do, you can change the form of that attack from energy to physical or mystic, whatever you want. If it deals damage, you also give the Hex condition. Now, Hex is, if you were to roll a critical, it still counts, but it does not explode. That includes dodges, attacks, and defenses. Now, why is this huge? For a couple of reasons. A, any beam attack or area effect attack is massive, right? It means that you can give multiple Hex tokens to multiple characters, the defense becomes weaker, their offense becomes weaker, etc., etc. Absolutely huge. Your characters like Vision in particular, you see very commonly with defenders, because he doesn't have a lot of power to spend on his abilities. He can also generate a bunch of power in himself, so he will be using this on almost every single attack and choosing the weakness of his opponent. Now, this is so huge because you look at someone like Venom. 4 physical, 3 mystic, 2 energy. I can spend a power to, instead of having a physical attack where he's got 4 defense dice, drop it down to 2 energy defense dice. You know, and potentially if he's hexed already, they don't explode. So it's massive. You know, you're actually subtracting dice from your opponent's defense roll. That's what you're spending a power for. On top of that, you get a hex as well, which is pretty free. That is awesome. That is exactly why someone like Doctor Strange ends up in the A tier for affiliation, or the Defenders ends up in the A tier of affiliations. Because with beam attacks, with area of attacks, you can offer so much, damage onto people, or taking away their dice and then making them weaker in the future. The downside to someone like Defenders is you take Doctor Strange, you take the Soul Stone. That's 6 threat right there. Moving forward, maybe you've got a Wong, 2 threat, pops you up to 8 already, and then your next weakness is Hawkeye or Valkyrie, which is again 3 threat. So to take defenders, you're at 3 threat already. That means if you're jumping up to a 15 threat game, you get like one other choice of 4 threat. If you want to run someone like a Ghost Rider instead of a Hawkeye or a Valk, suddenly you're at 14 threat already. So very, very threat heavy in what they do have. You only get, 1 or 2 choices in what you really want to bring. Maybe on some of those higher threat games, you get a little bit more versatility on that. But that's the big weakness I find to someone like Defenders. You just don't get as much versatility as maybe you'd like. But otherwise, spreading around that hex, changing to people's weaknesses, absolutely huge. You look at Thor as an example, 4/4 on physical and energy, 3 on mystique. Or on mystical. So being able to take away an opponent's dice is definitely worth a power plus the hex. So don't underestimate that at all. But now we have the Green Goblin. It's another really interesting character because his affiliation of Spider Foes says once per turn, when an allied character is attacking, you can spend a power to modify an opponent's defense dice. If it does, you may re-roll 1 opposing defense dice. Now, this is an interesting one because, again, I associate kind of 1 dice roll with 1 power. That's kind of how I see it and how Marvel Crisis Protocol or Atomic Mass Games has definitely shown that. This is, in particular, very powerful with Green Goblin when he offers Incinerate tokens as well. Because if people roll skulls and things like that and they struggle to re-roll it, you can then re-roll them back. If I get a skull and 2 successes, I can re-roll success into a fail. It's kind of like modifying your own dice a little bit, but because your opponent's dice are so limited and you've only got... wild, crit, and 1 defense dice, 1 shield, so it's a 3 and 8. So it's actually a pretty weak chance to potentially be getting these defenses off. So even limiting that by re-rolling can definitely make it pretty powerful. Again, a lot of people might have wilds on a lot of particular things. Obviously, defense, it doesn't happen as much, but we'll see maybe things do get released if wilds on defense. Being able to re-roll that is absolutely huge. Sneaking through a bit of a damage is definitely strong. I think Green Goblin might be kind of like a B.5 style range. You bring him down to the B tier, maybe in that half. What does make Spider Foes so powerful in my mind is the characters they can bring. They can bring Green Goblin, who's an absolute powerhouse on the field, particularly if he gets to flip. You get to bring Venom, who's an absolute powerhouse on the field. You could even potentially bring Kingpin now, who's an absolute powerhouse on the field. Crazy, I know we're feeling it. Obviously, very, very high threat. Goblin's 4, Kingpin's 4, and Venom's 4. So you're already looking at 12 threat. So you do lose that versatility, but the characters themselves are actually worth the 4 threat, and I can see people bringing these characters anyway, irrelevant of that particular affiliation. You see Venom constantly anyway. So that's a bit of the saving grace. Reroll an opponent's defense dice, again, always really huge. You've only got 2 defense dice, and I get to reroll one of them. You roll a skull and a wild, and I reroll that wild into a blank. Absolutely huge. So the chances of failure are very, very high. You don't get a huge swath of kind of dice to even out the odds for these particular defenses. That's why I think Green Goblin's strong. Limited versatility, but the characters you do bring are going to be huge. I think when Carnage does come out as well, that's going to be a completely different story. I think it's going to make Spidey Foes possibly push them over the edge to be exceptionally in that A tier squad. So look, now I'll jump on to Kingpin. Kingpin, I think, is very, very powerful. Not popping up properly here. Kingpin is very, very powerful in my mind because he currently offers something that isn't reliably within the game right now, and that is palming off objectives. Again, these characters, they similar to kind of the Spidey Foes affiliation and even Doctor Strange, these characters love their power is the big problem, right? They're huge, huge power spenders. Kingpin isn't as much of a power spender in my mind. His cane laser and his headbutt already don't spend too much power, so I think he's really happy to spend power on his particular affiliation. Now, the affiliation has a whole bunch of words, so prepare for this one, but it says, once per turn at any time during an allied character's activation, it may spend 2 power to use this leadership ability. So it has to be the active character, so keep that in mind. But they can move an asset or civilian token onto another character within range 3, or allied character within range 3. You obviously can't exceed how many you can hold. In civilians, you can only ever hold 1 civilian, so you can't exceed the amount of civilians you can legally hold. So do keep that in mind. But you can ship them around as required, which is really powerful because it means Kingpin, he can just start eating up all of these civilians, all of these assets, even the hammers and things like that, and it's so hard to push him around. So I think being able to just have someone run forward, grab an objective, run back and throw it onto Kingpin or other big heavy tanks, I think is going to be very, very strong I played a game with Bill recently where Kingpin and Black Panther came up on one side of the board, and I looked at that and I said, my God, there's no way I'm punching through this. There's just nothing. So imagining having some 2 easy, cheaper threats running around, which is what the Syndicate's going to be really strong at. Things like Bullseye coming through at relatively low threats. They're going to be running around, grabbing all these objectives, and then just throwing them onto Kingpin or Black Panther or some massive tank and say, if you want the objectives, go deal with them. And I really think Kingpin's actually going to shake up the meta in a really, really healthy way. It's going to be really cool. So keep an eye on Kingpin. But there's more to this ability. So hold up. It says, additionally, each allied healthy character contesting objective counts as 2 healthy characters. So your things like your origin bombs, where you've got to roll defense dice above the amount of healthy opponents in there, that's going to be huge. You put Kingpin on objective, people having to roll 3 dice successfully. Again, you throw a Black Panther in that affiliation as well, and you're just never going to hold these guys off objectives. I think there's a really, really intense, awesome objective-based game that Kingpin does get to play, and I think that's why this affiliation is an A. Again, you have to spend the power, which is 2 power, which is pretty huge, but you also get a static ability that doesn't involve power, and that is absolutely huge as well. Again, you look at the affiliations, Kingpin's 4, and I'm going to expect a lot of 3s, maybe some 2s in this Crime Syndicate affiliation as well. So Kingpin 4, a 3 and a 2, suddenly you're at 9. Again, you've got that freedom of 6 threat at a 15-point game to put in whatever you want, a 4 and a 2 or a 3 and a 3, and as you go high, you can just add more and more into that. I do think Black Panther will actually fit in really well with that idea of the Syndicate. Put them on opposite sides of the board. And you have these tanks that can't really die, and that's 8 threat plus a 2, that's 10, and then you grab another 3 from the Crime Syndicate. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So I think that's why Kingpin's at that A tier. Now jumping into the Wakanda affiliation, King T'Challa himself, Black Panther. Now, he says, after an allied character rolls attack, defense, or dodge dice, you may spend a power. If it does, you can re-roll one of that dice. Now, whilst that is strong, I don't necessarily think it's the most powerful in the game. I think there's a couple of combinations of things that bring Wakanda affiliation into this A tier and almost bordering on S. And it's the fact that you get Black Panther at 4, you get Shuri at 3, and you get Okoye at 2. That is 9 threat, and you're in Wakanda. And it's not just the fact that you're bringing low characters or low threat characters, but these characters are very powerful. They are super strong. They are core characters you see in non-Wakanda affiliations. Black Panther is an absolute tank that cannot die. You see Shuri offering a bunch of rerolls anyway. She kind of offers the Wakanda affiliation as it is. So that's an awkward kind of combination of things anyway. But then Okoye is huge in itself anyway. She just, as a bodyguard, people stop dying. You can do protect the president style lists with this. I think Wakanda offers probably almost the most versatility in all of these affiliations, and that's what makes Wakanda so strong. The ability, again, as I've already gone over, and it's reiterate too many times, but 1 dice for a spend is pretty good. It means that if you're spiking, you can try and spike a bit harder. People on like Black Panther, who already has these huge defenses and includes blanks and things like that, you can re-roll that 1 extra dice and stop the damage, which is just so huge. Sometimes 1 damage makes or breaks a game. Being able to offer that, particularly on the dodge dice as well, where kind of that guaranteed damage is coming through, being able to re-roll those dice, absolutely huge. But again, affiliation, maybe not the absolute be-all and end-all, but the fact that you are in that affiliation for such a cheap amount of threat with such awesomely powerful characters is really what makes that affiliation top tier. Now, jumping into Miles Morales' Spider-Man. This is an interesting one again. I think, again, having a static affiliation ability is absolutely huge. And what Spider-Man says is when an allied character may re-roll 1 defense dice, so it's not offense or dodge or anything like that, it's just defense dice, but it's a free re-roll across the board, so keep that in mind. Additionally, they may modify and re-roll skulls whilst holding or contesting objectives. I think that is the key point about why Web Warriors is so strong. When you're sitting on objectives, you can re-roll these skulls. If you only have 2 or 3 defense, say you've got the Incinerate token or whatever it may be, and you're rolling these skulls, you still have that ability to keep re-rolling them and have that secondary chance to get back into the game. And I think that's so huge. Having a static, non-power spending re-roll across the board is massive. Now, a bit of a downside to Web Warriors is you're taking Miles Morales, you're probably taking Venom. Don't worry, that's fine. But then you're also taking Ghost Spider, probably, or maybe you're taking Peter Parker himself. And either or, that brings you to the 4 plus 3 is 7 plus the extra 3. So you're looking at 10 to 11 threat. So your options of what you can bring, you've really only got one, maybe two other characters that you can bring into that, and they're fairly low characters, which means across the board you're running 3 threat characters, which isn't wrong or bad, but it does leave you with squishy teams or really linear teams in certain ways. It means that 3 threats, they can just die. They can just die. They don't necessarily pack as big a punch as you need, so you can't spike and kill people, which is why you get Venom in a lot of those ways. But that's definitely the downside of the Web Warriors. The characters that you're kind of forced to bring, definitely, for starters, they're power hungry, and they have no real ways to get power, but they can die, a bit of a spike out, or even a medium spike out, not a huge spike on the attack dice, can really wipe out these characters. And even though you have the reroll on defense, sometimes it's just not enough when you've got too many dice coming up against you, or too many people attacking at once. So do keep that in mind. Really, really strong. It's a free reroll, absolutely huge affiliation, but you're forced into kind of compulsorily taking relatively squishy teams. Again, I think Carnage might be on the Web Warriors as well as Spidey Foes, because obviously you got that double thing, kind of like Venom. So it'll be really, really interesting to see how Carnage kind of fits in that gap. If it's a 3 or a 4 threat with maybe some tank or some heavy hitting stats, I think that can definitely change up. But at the moment, like I said, versatility, solid, but you are unfortunately restricted in that linear sense of, if you want to bring a really tanky or powerful character to supplement Venom, you're running like a 4 character list at most, which can be a bit awkward at times. Again, depends on the threat you're taking and things like that, but a free reroll, absolutely huge, especially on objectives, rerolling skulls and things like that. Definitely huge. So a bit of strengths and weaknesses. Now, looking into the B tier squads. So Thor as an example. Now, these they're fine affiliations, but they also are quite restrictive in the team that you can take. As an example, Thor, his affiliation is at the start of your turn. You can spend, at the start of any character's turn, so keep that in mind, quite powerful. Any character may spend a power, and if they do, they can remove a status token from them or heal a damage. So they can only do it once per round, I believe it is. You can only, each character may use his leadership once per round. So each character across the board, for what it's worth, can spend a power to heal themselves one or remove a token, which is, again, very, very powerful in a lot of different ways. So each person can spend 1 to do any of that once per round. Now, what are the downsides? Because that's obviously a very strong thing, giving yourself some cheeky healing. You're going to be taking Asgardians, so a lot of them have 2 power to begin with every single turn anyway. So you can actually end up healing just 1 wounded turn or removing these status tokens. Where do the weakness fall in? Obviously, multiple status tokens is quite weak for them. If you spike them out, healing 1 health isn't really a huge amount, to be quite frank. Sometimes 1 health can definitely make or break it. Obviously, with characters with very high defense, such as Thor, that 1 health can actually be quite useful. Removing status conditions, again, if you pile them on, you get rid of some of the weaker or the important ones to get rid of, not the weak ones, but the stronger ones. But here's the big problem. Take Asgardians, you've got Thor, that's 5 threat. You're probably taking Loki, give or take, that's 4 threat. So you're already at 9. Maybe you take Valkyrie as your 3rd and final on that one, and that's 12 threat already. Let alone if you want to take a Hela, or we've got a couple new Asgardians coming out. I think Angela's coming out as an Asgardian as well. Who's like a 5 threat character as well. So you're actually quite limited in what you can take with Asgardians. You're forced into pretty heavy threat characters. If you take a Stone on Loki, suddenly he's 5 threat, and you're looking at 13 threat before you even begun the game. That's 3 characters, 13 threat. You get to take a 2 threat if you're in a 15 threat game. So you take like a Wong or an Okoye or something, whatever it may be. Maybe when you get to the higher threats, you get a bit more benefits. But I think you're limited. Your character selection is pretty low. And even though they're great characters, Loki's definitely gets in the way and very frustrating. Thor can get in the way, is very frustrating. But Thor's also very power hungry. So, are you spending your Asgardian power to heal yourself and take these, or do you want to use it to throw and punch and charge and all of these different things, So I think that's kind of the weakness towards Asgardians. Fairly limited character pool with very, very high threats. And whilst their affiliation works really well, I don't think it almost works well with the Asgardians. I think they'd rather other things, either more power generating or a static ability where you don't have to spend power. Because even though they gain a lot of power, they also want to spend a lot of power pretty consistently. Loki's always trying to run away. You want to Dragon Fang on Valkyrie. Thor wants to smash up to his God of Thunder as soon as possible. Those type of things, There's a little bit of a weakness in my mind to the Asgardians. Versatility, and they're power hungry anyway, so trying to get to that power, little bit awkward. Now, Thanos is very unique in his affiliation because he actually has 2 affiliation abilities, one on the front side, one on the back side. Front side says whenever you whenever you KO an opponent, you get a victory point. Pretty huge, but I'll explain why I don't think that works too well with Black Order, ironically. And then the flip side is during the modify dice step of an attack, you can take 3 damage to re-roll 3 dice. Means you're not spending power, which is pretty huge. Normally, if Thanos is flipped, you're probably in the later ends of the game. Maybe your characters are actually a little bit wounded and you can't spend the 3. Because if you do hit 0, you're immediately dazed. The attack ends, so you can't spend the 3. I believe it's up to 3 though. Yeah, up to 3, so you can take 1 or 2 instead of the 3, which is pretty strong. I'd almost would have rather see this on the front side. And kind of flip it so you can maybe push yourself onto the backside while also hurting the other opponents. Then when Thanos flips, all of a sudden you start to KO them from dazed. I think that would have been a lot better for them. Maybe not as thematic, but a lot better. Now, why do I think that the first part of this ability isn't so good for Black Order? Because he says whenever an enemy is KO'd, you get a victory point. Black Order doesn't care about victory points. They care about killing you. They want to punch you real hard. And getting VPs doesn't really matter because if your opponent's a VP scoring team, they're going to be up there on the VP over you anyway. So closing that gap just doesn't really matter a huge amount because you're trying to kill them before the game's over or punch them completely off objectives, in which case you're getting the VPs and they're not. So killing them doesn't really do that much. Maybe in a world where they take a bunch of VP early and you try and claw your way back, it can matter. But if you flip Thanos before you actually get to start hurting them, on top of that, the versatility of Black Order is very, very limited. You're taking Thanos, you're taking a time stone on him, you just are. So he's already like an 8-threat character. You're taking Corvus and Proxima if you're running Black Order. That's a 4 and a 3 plus the stone on Corvus. Which stone? It's not the Soul Stone. It's not the Power Stone. Reality Stone on Corvus as well. So that's a 5-threat plus the 3 of Proxima Midnight. So that's 8 plus 8. You're at 16 threat. Boom. You know, like, great, that's your 3-squad team. And don't get me wrong, they will murderize people real good. And they turn your 5-character list into a 4-character list real quick. But again, you're just very limited. If I see a Thanos and I see Corvus and Proxima, I know what your list is. You're also taking Thanos, Stone, Proxima, Corvus, Stone. That's 5 characters out of your list that you're taking to play Black Order. And the other 5, you have to somehow make a full affiliation into that anyway. So I think you're just so limited in what Black Order can do. Black Order does what Black Order does well, but it is a very, very linear strategy, and that can be counteracted in a lot of different ways. So that's where I definitely see the weakness of Black Order coming forward. And again, the flip side is really good. I actually wish if they'd swapped the affiliations on that, because it would have been really, really good. So yeah, benefits, minuses. Again, not having to spend power on affiliations is always really, really strong. Spending your own health to reroll dice is really good in my opinion, because when you're looking at Corvus and Proxima anyway, they're looking to one-shot people. They're looking to KO people. They don't care about taking the extra damage. If it means killing you on the spot or dazing you, whatever it may be, they're more than prepared to do that. So I think that's a really, really interesting aspect of kind of that. But again, lack of versatility. Maybe not the best affiliation, brings that down into the C tier. And finally, we have Star-Lord. I think Star-Lord, unfortunately, where once upon a time was one of my top tier characters, I thought I played Star-Lord and he was such a long range 4 full auto, throwing 7 dice at people was huge. But I think he's getting outclassed by even the Hawkeyes and things like that. So, look, the affiliation in my mind is pretty rubbish. You at the start of a character, once per round at the start of your turn, you can choose an allied character. That's once per round at the start of your turn. Already, you can't even do it in the middle of turns if you want to change your mind. It has to be at the start. You sacrifice one of your team tactics cards, which is huge, and I'll get into that in just a moment. And then you give a singular character 3 winging it tokens. You can then spend a winging it token on a attack, defense, or dodge dice, and you can re-roll 2 of them. Now look, re-rolling 2 dice, pretty huge. You can only use 1 winging it token per thing, so you think re-rolling 6 dice in total is going to be pretty good. You often will not do that. If you attack twice, you spend the 2 winging it tokens, and then people can just not attack you back because you've used your turn, right? Maybe you can use it very particularly when you need a character to survive, but you only need it on 1 attack when you're defending against it. So you re-roll 2 defense dice on that. Like it's not that... It's good, but sacrificing a team tactics card where I could just disarm my opponent and make you spend 2 less dice to attack, or healing up med packing a person, or R&Ding, or the new Guardians of the Galaxy card where all of your characters then get to move around the board. or the Rocket Raccoon where you get to spend his card to attack multiple times. Like, these are what you're sacrificing for the ability to re-roll a couple dice. And I think Team Tactics card, considering they're restricted, you only get 5 of them, is so huge. You just cannot sacrifice these kind of ace in the hole style cards just to potentially re-roll a couple times. Maybe you blank out anyway and re-rolling 2 dice doesn't do anything. Maybe you spike out and re-rolling 2 dice doesn't do anything. Maybe they just don't attack you, or everyone moves away onto objectives, and these dice and these winged tokens. If you only use the 2 winged tokens over the 3, it's garbage. Maybe you have to, So, not sold. On top of that, you do have a bit of versatility in the Guardians of the Galaxy in your character choices. I played with them and ended up having like 6 characters on the team, so I think Guardians in itself is pretty fine, but the affiliation's real rough. And even so, so the threat level's really low on them, right? You take Star-Lord, maybe Groot and Rocket, that's your 5 plus 3, that's 8, That's one of the cheapest affiliations you can take. And if you're looking to do multiple swarm lists, Guardians of the Galaxy is definitely what you're looking at taking. But I just don't think that affiliation works well. And I think something like maybe Crime Syndicate moving forward will end up doing that a little bit better. I think they're going to end up with a bunch of 3, possibly 2, but a lot of 3 threat characters in my mind. And so you can run that swarm list with Syndicate where they're running up and grabbing things. So I think that they probably, and that affiliation is significantly better than potentially getting some good rerolls at the sacrifice of a Team Tactics card. So a combination of kind of Star-Lord maybe being fortunately outclassed, and that affiliation just not doing what like other characters just do that already. Like, you're spending cards to reroll 2 dice, where once off, whereas Miles Morales just does it defensively, mind you, across the board. Black Panther can do it for a power, and I'd rather think I'd spend a power, even though there's an incredible resource, than one of my 5 Team Tactics cards. I only have 5 of them, and that's why I think kind of Guardians of the Galaxy maybe not as strong as they could be. And the characters are all right generally. And you have arguably the most versatility almost out of any affiliation because they cost so little. But the affiliation itself is just really rough. I'd probably rather end up spending that 2 or 3 extra threat for a better affiliation, quite frankly. I think affiliations themselves are worth a threat each, and that's why Star-Lord's a 3-threat character, because his affiliation isn't even worth a threat, really. So. But look, that's the affiliations. As more come out, I'll update the list. As more characters come out and Team Tactics cards come out, I think these will definitely change and chip and chop and change and all of this throughout the lists. But look, comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me if I hit the nail on the head. Tell me how wrong I am at times. I'm more than happy to kind of go over these and change them up and chat in the comments about what all this is about. But until then, you stay safe out there. You have a lovely day. I love you all. I'm going to throw it to Ali. She can tell you how you can check out all our different social medias. On top of that, you can check out our website, generalgames.com.au, where you can pre-order all of these products for nearly 20% plus off their RRP when they are available. So do check out generalgames.com.au. But otherwise, I'm going to throw it to Ali. She'll check out how all our different other social medias. Goodbye.
Hey guys, it's Ali. If you like that video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe for more interesting content. You can also follow us on Facebook for more information and events. Likewise, follow us on Instagram for those behind the scenes photos and videos. See ya.